What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place with kind of a weird one today, I'll admit. Thanks for clicking, first of all, because I'm not even sure how many people are going to want to watch something like this in the first place. So appreciate you being here, but if I found this information interesting, and I did, then I'm hoping you will too. Plus, about once a month, roughly, I have the time to do whatever kind of video I want to do on the channel, and this month I'm picking my spots for Mystery Booster 2 for whatever reason. I have my reasons, because a couple of nights ago, I was doing what could loosely be considered research for a video just like this one, but about Edge of Eternities instead. I figured it's been a couple of weeks or months really now since Edge of Eternities came out. Time flies in Magic, and the prices have settled down, so what are the best buys from a cool set like Edge? But in doing that, I came across an article about the top 10 most expensive Mystery Booster 2 cards, and I decided to give that a read, and it was interesting, to say the least. There's a command tower in the set that'll cost you about half of your monthly grocery bill. That's wild, but you know me, if I'm going to look at the most expensive cards in a set, I have to also see what the cheapest cards in that set are. And it was at that point that I went on quite the voyage of discovery, man. I really didn't know what all was in this set, save for really just a few cards. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other people had that experience. It's been out for almost exactly a year at this point, but it never got an official retail release. I mean, sure, maybe some LGSs ordered boxes and sold packs individually, but not all of them did that, and you couldn't get it at like Walmart and Target or anything. You mostly got Mystery Booster 2 at conventions and whatnot. So the set has remained relatively obscure throughout the community, and that would make you think that the set hasn't circulated very much and prices remained high. Well, that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of cards in this set that have only been printed in like one other set ever, and the prices between them are drastically different. And we're talking about some really playable cards. So again, I found this really interesting, and I decided, let's make a video so at least I can go back and watch it to remember when I need to. So I guess if nothing else, hi Dev, I'm sure you'll be watching in the future, but in any case, I hope you guys enjoy it too. Let's look at the best buys for Mystery Booster 2.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back to look at some honorable mentions because, of course, you think I was really going to keep it to 10 cards? I got 3 honorable mentions I want to talk about, and I'm being merciful. It could have been way more. So let's start things off with Control the Court over here. A card that isn't unlike something we've seen before. As a matter of fact, it's exactly Goblin Lore. But imagine that you had 2 Goblin Lores in your deck that cared about drawing cards or something. Maybe you have Madness or Mayhem. Kind of crack up now when I say, like, maybe you're playing Mayhem. You're probably not, let's be honest, right? But still, I think that this might be good with things that want you to discard cards. But the best thing about it is that you draw 4 freaking cards. It's not like Goblin Lore is unplayable. And so Control the Court certainly is. But maybe the best thing, and the thing I wanted to point out the most about Control the Court, is that it is about 75 cents from Mystery Booster 2. And it's $23 from Portal 3 Kingdoms, which is the only other set that it's ever been printed in. This isn't the best, quote-unquote, price ratio in its whole set. I think that the actual best price ratio in the set also comes from Portal 3 Kingdoms. There's like a Elvish Piper dupe in the set of some kind, and that is like $75 or some nonsense price from Portal 3 Kingdoms, whereas it's like 75 cents for Mystery Booster 2. So again, if you wanted the highest price ratio, it's probably that card, but you're doing pretty good with this one too. You don't want to pay $23 for Goblin Lore. You'd rather pay 70 cents for your second copy of that card. My next HM is Eater of the Dead. I just talked about this card in my full set review of the Dark. How interesting is that subject matter? Probably not to a lot of people, but this time you don't have to wait 2.5 hours to get to one of the more interesting cards in the set. And it is, man. It looks like it costs a lot of mana, but it's actually going to pay you back the turn you play it if you're doing things correctly, because it's not like this can make infinite mana with Cryptolith Rite or Enduring Vitality, but those are good ways to get started. Agatha's Soul Cauldron's another good way to get started. If you give this a tap ability of some kind, then all you got to do to untap it is remove a creature card in a yard from the game. It's any yard too. You don't have to keep your yard stocked with guys. I'm sure one of your opponents is nice enough to have a creature in their yard most of the time. Right, but whether you're doing cool activated abilities or you're just like generating mana with it, the creature is pretty cool in the modern age because there's a lot of ways to slap abilities onto it. So that just makes Eater of the Dead way better. It's less than $1 for Mystery Booster 2, but if you want it from the Dark, it's like $6, so it's not like the best like ratio again in the entire video or anything. But I do think that if you don't want to spend $6 on an Eater of the Dead, and I wouldn't blame you, But I think that 70 cents or so would be a much more reasonable price. So if you want to pick it up, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with it. But my last honorable is Walking Ballista, just because this is the cheapest set you can get a Ballista from right now. It's like $15 everywhere else. It's $9 for Mystery Booster 2. So I wanted to like briefly point this out. I definitely didn't want it on the main list, but in case you don't have a Ballista yet, MB2, can we just call it that? MIB, Men in Black 2, is the best way to get a copy of this card. But onto the actual list, this one kind of feels similar to Walking Ballista in some ways. Number 10 is Ensnaring Bridge, and I say that because, you know, a lot of people already have their Ensnaring Bridge or whatever, but if you wanted an Ensnaring Bridge for the cheapest possible price, it's $5 from Mystery Booster 2. That is basically 50% off. If you wanted one from basically any other set, it's like $10. And that's not really that much to ask either for an Ensnaring Bridge. It's an extremely powerful and annoying Magic card. A lot of the entries on this list are kind of aggravating. I'll go ahead and tell you that right now. And Ensnaring Bridge is no exception. You know, I think a lot of people want to play with this card, but $10 looks a little bit too steep. $5? Price is right, baby. That's the same as like a Ghostly Prison. I can swing that. But at the same time, just like Ballista, everybody knows about Ensnaring Bridge, right? So I want to get to the slightly spicier stuff with a much better price ratio. Things like Scale Lord Reckoner, a card that I honestly wasn't aware of until I saw it in Mystery Booster 2, but it's a heck of a Magic card, man. Like, this will kind of make it to where you have a sort of karmic justice effect, but for your dragons. You know, they want to target your dragons, suddenly you get to blow up whatever you want to on the other side of the table, save for lands or whatever, but that's pretty good. That's good enough to put in your dragons deck for sure, especially your 5-color dragons decks, which tend to be some of the most popular dragons builds in Commander right now. So you're playing like Dragon or whatever, I think you probably want this dude because people are always trying to blow your dragons up. Protect your investment and maybe, you know, enact some vengeance upon them when they target your dragons. That seems pretty dope. But the cool thing about this is the ratio. This is about $1.50, something like that, $1.25 from this set. It is it's $8.50 from Commander 2017, which is, I think, the only other set that it's ever been printed in. Not the most obscure set in the world. That thing was opened, you know, but only having one printing up to now definitely makes $1 plus for this card, and that is it. Seemed like a pretty freaking good price. I know it's a little bit narrow just to really only applies to people building Dragon Commander decks, but that's probably less narrow than I think it is. Another one that caught my eye was Zombie Master here at number 8, man. This is like $7 from most of the sets that it's been printed in. You start at about $7 for this card, and if you want a revised or, God forbid, an unlimited edition one, then it gets a little bit more expensive from there. But if you'd rather pay, you know, 70 cents for it, I guess you do that. It's like 75 cents for Mystery Booster 2, which is a 90% or so reduction in price from like any other version of this card. And Zombie Master is a really powerful card for, again, a specific creature type, but I think that even more people are building zombies than are building dragons. I don't know, I might want to check EDA Trek on that, but either way, zombies are a really, really popular creature type, and it's always felt like Zombie Master is kind of one of those cards that you need to play in a straight-up zombies deck, especially a mono-black one, but even blue-black zombies can definitely fit a zombie anthem effect, right? It seems okay, so I don't know, man, it's always felt like a shame that a card so, like, simple and almost necessary for certain builds has cost so much, but not anymore. It's a very, very reasonable price for this. I'm a little jacked up today. I feel slightly jacked up. I don't know, it's interesting subject matter to me, and so is number 7, Power Matrix. This might be a card you've never heard of before. This too has only been printed in Mercadian masks ever before this. And it's also like $7, you know, just like the last card we looked at, for basically any other version, which again is just the mass version. But if you want the Mystery Booster 2 one, it's 70 cents. It's 70 cents. Have you had a chance to read this card yet, by the way? It's a little bit expensive to get on the table in the first place, but it gives a creature a power boost and a bunch of incredible abilities that go pretty nicely together all at the same time. And there's going to be certain commanders and creatures that a Power Matrix goes specifically well with, but it goes very nicely with literally any creature in the game of Magic. Plus, any deck can play it. It might be specifically good in artifact decks, especially artifact creature decks. So there's just a lot to like about Power Matrix, and it's kind of shocking they've never printed it outside of Masks before, until now at least. And again, I think that's a more than reasonable price for what appears to be a really powerful artifact in the right situation. And I don't think it's too difficult to run into the right situation. There's actually a few expensive cards from Arcadian Masks, which is already a weird sentence. You wouldn't think that would be the case, but there are a few expensive cards from Masks that got reprinted into Mystery Booster 2 that I'm excited about. We'll come across another one later I like even more, but for now we'll get to Seed Time at number 6. This is a really powerful spell. It's pretty simple too. You probably already read it in the 5 seconds it's been on screen. Just a couple of mana to cast Time Walk, which is how much Time Walk typically costs to cast. But in this case, the player who would normally cast a Time Walk has to have cast a spell for you to be able to play this. A blue spell gets cast, and suddenly you can Time Walk, which is really not too much to ask. I think at most commander tables, you're going to have a blue spell cast from time to time, and all you really got to do is bait them into countering a spell and then cast Seed Time. Like, thanks, I'll just take a whole extra turn. I appreciate you. So, seems like a pretty powerful effect for most green decks at most commander tables, and it's only $4 for Mystery Booster 2. This was printed in Judgment and only Judgment before this, and it's like $12-13 from that set. So you're getting a pretty hefty discount for a Time Walk, do you understand? But maybe you think Seed Time is too a little bit narrow, right? Like, oh, I got to play it against blue spells only, and everybody at my pod plays Orzhov. I don't know. Cool pod, by the way. But either way, okay, I'll give you a much greener, maybe not better card necessarily, but at least one that you can brew around a little bit more, and that is number 5, Mana Bond. This was only ever printed in Exodus before Mystery Booster 2, but somehow skipped the reserve list, so good for us, because now we get a reprint of it for just a few dollars. Not even, actually. I just checked my prices. It's like $1.75 for a Mana Bond, which is a freaking steal. How is that possible? This is over $8 from Exodus, and I think it's only $8 because it looks like it's not a very good Magic card, but there's actually tons of potential ways to abuse this thing. Obviously, landfall decks might really like this, depending on what landfall effects you got going on. If your creatures get a little bit larger until end of turn when you play a land, it's probably not that big of a deal, but if you got creatures that make creatures or enchantments that make creatures or all kinds of other stuff landfall does, draw cards, deal damage, whatever, suddenly this can put a bunch of creatures onto the table at the end of the turn or a bunch of cards into your hand. I've also seen at least one person on the internet playing this with Flubs the Fool, which I find a pretty funny interaction. Just discard your hand. Even if you don't have any lands in your hand, discard your hand at end of turn, and now you're set up to always draw a card off of Flubs when you play basically anything. So that's a cute interaction. There's a bunch of cute interactions with this thing. Again, just like I said earlier on a different card. Madness, Mayhem, anything that you want to discard cards for, Reanimator, blah, blah. There's a lot of reasons to want to discard stuff. But even without pretending that discarding cards is an upside, because it's usually not, just ramping a bunch of lands onto the table at the end of the turn could be, potentially good enough. Like Bobby's over there all excited that he got his Soul Ring on turn 1, and you're like, oh yeah, it's super cute. Here's 6 mana on turn 1. How you feel about that, kid? But anyway, we got to keep moving here. So let's look at number 4, which is Static Orb. Now, this has been printed a couple of times before, but actually the cheapest place you can get it from is Tempest, because this somehow too skipped the reserve list and got printed in 7th edition as well. For whatever reason, the 7th edition printing is more expensive than the Tempest printing. Whatever, man. But this is by far the cheapest way you can get a Static Orb. It is $2.50 for this thing right now. Whereas from Tempest, it's like $13 or something. So again, you're getting a massive discount on one of the more aggravating cards you probably ever laid eyes on. The Static Orb has one of the more irritating interactions of all time, where at the end of your opponent's turn, you can use an effect that taps it down. And then when you go to untap, you get to untap all your stuff. All your lands, all your creatures, doesn't matter, have fun, bud. But your opponents obviously still have to abide by the rules of the Static Orb, which is pretty wild because you actually get to play Magic and nobody else does. So everyone will hate you, which is definitely, there's a price to that in a Commander game for sure. But as to whether or not they'll actually be able to do anything about it, that's a whole other question. Now, to be honest, I don't necessarily always want to be that guy in a Commander game, and I don't really advocate for you necessarily being that guy, but if you wanted to be that guy, it's like $2 to do that. So I think it's a pretty good price for, again, not only one of the strongest Magic cards of all time, like it's in the top 300, you know what I mean? Like it's up the list somewhere. Static Orb is great in terms of power level, but it's also just maybe one of the most annoying cards that's ever been printed, and it's way higher up on that list. So get this thing if you if you want to do that to people. But another card that's kind of similar is Crackdown here at number 3. This, another Mercadian Mask card. I said there'd be another one earlier. This is about $11 or so, 10, $11 for Mercadian Masks, whereas it is a whopping $1 for Mystery Booster 2. And have you had time to read this? Speaking of not untapping stuff, right? Now, if you have a static orb and this in play, they can't really untap much of anything at all. And this is really good in a ton of, especially mono white decks, but, you know, any white deck that plays a bunch of little creatures, especially stuff like Delny, which, you know, you're building around creatures power 2 or less in the first place, but maybe even in like some Aristocrats builds where most of your dudes are small anyway, and a lot of your dudes are white, right? Or maybe they're Orzhov, so they count as white, so that's kind of nice. But, you know, even outside of Aristocrats, Delny, there's a ton of little aggro builds that might be able to take advantage of a card like this. It's very little mana. I mean, 3 mana is about the top of what I want to pay for an effect like this, but it's a reasonable amount of mana to make sure that none of the big dudes ever untap. That's kind of wild. That's a little bit savage. So, yeah, the fact that this is only $1, I think, is an incredible price for a card that may not go in every mono white commander deck. Honestly, there's a lot of like must plays that are taking up slots in Mono White Commander right now, but this might be another one that you want to consider adding, especially again if you're on like Ghostly Prison and effects like that. This is a good one to add. But man, we made it all the way to number 2. Maybe it's a good time for a little reset over here. Not on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but the actual card reset. I actually just talked about this in a different video, but because we were covering all of the like best buys from Golden Age sets, basically, you know, and that was a really fun video to do too, by the way. Go watch that. Almost nobody watched that video. If you watch that one, you're probably also watching this one. You just watch all my stuff. I appreciate you. But it's the only reason you'd watch this video, I think. But in any case, man, Reset is actually a really good Magic card, and it's only ever been printed before this in Legends. But two, did not get hit by the reserve list. It just took them 30 years to reprint the card. So they finally did, and when that happened, the price of a Legends Reset took a slight dip, right? But I'd say that card's like $25 or something right now. I think you can get a heavily played copy of Reset from Legends for like $15, which is not a bad deal for a powerful playable from Legends. So I'm not even necessarily past buying a copy from the old set, but if you wanted to spend as little possible money, that's a Magic player right there. If you want to spend as little possible money on this as you can, which I think most people will, it's like $3 for Mystery Booster 2, which is a really good deal too for a card like this. 2 mana to untap all your mana. You can only play it on your opponent's turn, but like, so that's my counter argument. So you're in blue, dog. You're playing like 70% of your spells on your opponent's turn anyway, or maybe even more some of the time. So you really don't mind. And when people think that you only have 2 mana up for a counter spell, suddenly you have, 12 mana up for a counter spell. It's a lot better. So Reset is wild. There's all kinds of ways to untap 1 billion mana, including your, Tolarian Academy or whatever it is, or you nick those Shrine to Nicks, and then suddenly you can do all kinds of stuff, from countering spells to drawing cards, playing flash creatures, activating artifacts. You're feeling pretty good. Blue mages do a lot on their opponent's turn. That makes Reset a ridiculous Magic card. But my number 1 card from Mystery Booster 2 that you might want to buy if you want to save some money and all that is Miri's Guile, which is $9 for Mystery Booster 2. That makes it the most expensive Mystery Booster card that showed up in this video, at least. But even though the ratio is not like that impressive compared to some of the stuff we've looked at, I still think that this is probably the card that you want the most from Mystery Booster 2. In general, I'm serious. There's a lot of good cards in MB2. If you want a Lotus Petal, this is the cheapest place to get a Lotus Petal too, so consider that. And basically every commander deck wants that no matter what. But Miri's Guile is a card that's only ever been printed once before in, I think, Exodus. God, am I right about that? I guess I'll find out in editing. Is it from Stronghold? I guess I'll find out. But either way, this has only been printed one other time, and it is a single mana for Sylvan Library that doesn't actually draw you any cards. Basically, like Scry 3 kind of. Look at the top 3 cards of your library during your upkeep. Put them back in any order. For 1 mana on an enchantment, that is a wild Magic card. this works with so many things, like specifically, you know, like things that want certain cards to be on top of your library. There are effects that maybe deal damage equal to the top card of your library's mana cost. There's a few things like that. There's effects like Bolus's Citadel, where like maybe, you know, reshuffling the first 3 cards of your library could make a huge difference in terms of how you sequence that turn, right? There's a lot of things that care about the top card of your library. Maybe you have a Courser of Kruphix effect and you want a land on top of your library. Maybe you have an Augur of Autumn effect and you want a different card type on top of your library. So there's a lot of things that Amiri's Guile can sort of help with. I just think that this is something that basically any green mage or any mage that wants to play green at some point in their Magic life could add to their deck and be really, really happy about the results. I hope you enjoyed this. If there are other cards from MB2 that you thought could make this video and just didn't, then maybe hit us up in the comments section. It's a really interesting set to look through if you haven't done it yet. And again, I imagine that like a vast majority of Magic players haven't taken the time to really look through Mystery Booster 2, but God, is it an interesting set, man. They reprinted a bunch of stuff in here that you've never seen outside of 1 or 2 other sets, and I didn't even get to all of it, not even close. So again, you got a couple of minutes, just load in Mystery Booster 2 to Card Kingdom or TCG Player or something, and take a, just browse through that thing, because there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And again, if you have any cool like buys from this set and beyond, let us know in the comments. But for now, that's Allski Kowalski, so I'm going to get out of your hair. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.